Niner Faithful, the pads are on in Santa Clara, and the San Francisco 49ers' first fully padded practice of Training Camp 2026 delivered exactly the kind of competitive evidence that the first week of non-contact work could only hint at. The hitting is real now. The roster decisions are going to start getting made based on what happens when bodies collide rather than what happens when routes are run in controlled space. And the single most impactful individual performance of the first padded practice did not come from the offense, even with Mike Evans and Ricky Pearsall and a freshly extended Brock Purdy all operating at genuinely high levels. It came from the defense, and specifically from the player who has been this franchise's most important defensive weapon for the past 6 years. Nick Bosa was absolutely ferocious in the first padded practice of training camp, and what he showed in the first 5 minutes of competitive team drills told you everything you need to know about what this defense is capable of when its foundational piece is operating without limitation or hesitation. Let us establish the specific context for why Bosa's first padded practice performance carries so much weight beyond the obvious fact that Nick Bosa dominating in any practice is genuinely exciting. Last season, Bosa dealt with physical issues that limited his effectiveness at various points throughout the year in ways that affected how opposing offensive lines chose to account for him in their protection schemes. When pass rushers carry even a slight physical limitation into competitive situations, experienced offensive tackles identify it almost immediately because the specific telltale signs of a rusher who is protecting something, the slightly shortened stride at the point of attack, the slightly less aggressive initial hand placement, the marginal reduction in the first step explosion that defines the advantage an elite pass rusher creates at the moment of initial engagement are visible to players who have spent their careers specifically preparing to identify and exploit exactly those limitations. On the first team period rep of the first padded practice of Training Camp 2026, Bosa engaged with the left tackle and exploded off the snap with a first step that was visibly, immediately, and completely different from any limited version of himself. Multiple reporters specifically noted the immediate difference in his physical presence from the moment the competitive contact began, describing the explosiveness of his initial movement as the specific quality that makes him genuinely difficult to account for at the professional level when he is fully healthy. An explosive first step means the offensive tackle cannot wait to see what rush lane Bosa is attacking before committing his leverage. He has to commit immediately based on imperfect pre-snap information, and Bosa's ability to make that initial commitment wrong through either his actual rush path or through manipulating the tackle's reaction to his first movement is the foundational mechanism through which his best pass rush production is generated. That specific mechanism was fully operational from Rep 1 of padded practice, and the reaction from the defensive coaching staff on the sideline reflected genuine, unapologetic excitement about what they were watching. Osa Odighizuwa's first padded practice performance built directly on what his early training camp non-contact work had already established, but the physical engagement dimension of padded competition revealed something specific about his game that non-padded settings simply cannot demonstrate: his hand strength. The specific quality of Odighizuwa's hand-fighting ability in padded contact situations was described by multiple reporters as genuinely exceptional, the kind of pass rusher characteristic that makes offensive linemen visibly frustrated because they cannot account for both the initial leverage and the hand strength simultaneously in the specific moment of contact engagement. When a pass rusher can win the hand fight and win the leverage battle, the specific combination makes every single protection call the offense makes less effective than the scheme predicts it should be. Because the assumed one-on-one containment assumes the pass rusher loses at least one of those two battles. Odighizuwa is not losing either one right now, and the offensive linemen who are engaging him in padded team periods are learning that lesson through direct competitive experience rather than through film study. The Bosa and Odighizuwa combination in a single padded practice team period produced something that the theoretical analysis of this defensive line addition had predicted but that needed competitive evidence to fully confirm. On a specific third and long team period rep, Odigizua generated immediate interior pressure that occupied both the center and the right guard in a double-team engagement that prevented either blocker from releasing to chip Bosa on the outside. Bosa won his one-on-one matchup against the left tackle in a situation where the tackle received no help because both interior blockers were fully committed to the Odigizua interior threat. The quarterback moved off his primary read, had no clean throwing lane in any direction, and the play was a technical sack in the team period context. That sequence, Odigizua generating a double team that exposed Bosa to a clean one-on-one he won, is the specific mechanism through which the addition of an elite interior pass rusher increases an elite edge rusher's production, and it happened in the very first padded practice of training camp. George Kittle's update from the first padded practice deserves the final team period of the practice. He ran 3 specific routes in a scripted team period concept at what observers described as something genuinely close to his normal competitive speed. Without any visible physical hesitation or compensating movement patterns that would indicate ongoing concern about the repaired suggests the trajectory toward that clearance is genuine, and the timeline for his return to full competitive participation is measured in days any non-contact session could reveal. Physical toughness in contested situations, the willingness to compete through contact from defenders in tight coverage scenarios, the ability to secure the ball after taking a hit rather than simply catching in space, all of these competitive qualities that define a receiver's actual value in game situations became visible for the first time in the padded competition. Dontavion Wicks specifically made a contested catch in a padded team period that generated genuine discussion among reporters covering the practice, fighting through contact at the catch point, and securing the ball cleanly after absorbing a hit from a defensive back who made a technically sound play on the ball. That specific moment, in the first padded practice of training camp, announced Wicks's legitimate claim on a depth receiver spot in a way that his non-contact work had only suggested. The offensive line performance in the first padded practice validated the optimism generated by the combination blocking timing visible in the non-contact sessions. Running lanes that the coaching staff had been building through the combination block assignments throughout the first week of camp appeared in live padded competition exactly as designed, specifically in the early team period running situations where Jahmyr Gibbs equivalent backs found clean lanes through the interior in ways that reflected the coordinated blocking execution rather than simply the individual strength of specific linemen against specific defenders. The competition within this offensive line group at specific spots continues to generate genuine competitive drama, but the overall unit quality is clearly better in padded competition than even the optimistic non-padded camp assessment suggested. Romello Height's first padded practice was the one genuinely cautionary note from an otherwise outstanding competitive session on the offensive side of the ball. Height was competitive in individual drills throughout the first padded session, showing the first step quickness and the natural leverage in his approach that made this organization willing to invest draft capital in his development. But in team period reps, the transition from individual competitive success to genuine team period effectiveness was visibly more difficult for him than the non-padded work had allowed anyone to fully anticipate. The physical engagement of padded competition revealed a young pass rusher who is still learning to trust his moves when the consequences of being wrong are immediately felt through the physical contact of the block rather than simply being processed through visual observation of a coverage position. That specific trust development is genuinely one of the hardest things for any young pass rusher to build, and it tends to happen through accumulated padded competitive experience rather than through any specific technical instruction. Height needs padded reps, a lot of them, and the trajectory of his development through the remainder of training camp and the preseason games is going to provide the clearest available evidence of how quickly that trust development is actually happening. The secondary observation from the first padded practice was the most mixed competitive picture of the entire session. Diamador Lenoir was excellent in the competitive one-on-one situations that padded practice creates, using his physicality at the line of scrimmage to disrupt receivers' releases in ways that non-padded work cannot replicate. The press coverage disruption that padded practice enables is genuinely central to what this defense is asking from its outside cornerbacks. And Lenoir's ability to win those physical engagement moments reflects exactly the competitive quality that makes him the most reliable starting cornerback on this roster. The safety room questions that the non-padded sessions raised about depth behind the starting group became somewhat more pressing in padded competition, specifically because the physical demands of coverage in padded situations expose the gap between experienced and inexperienced defensive backs more clearly than any other competitive context. Brock Purdy's extension announcement, completed earlier this week, was the backdrop against which every single competitive moment of the first padded practice played out, and it is impossible to fully separate the organizational energy of this padded practice session from the specific significance of what was announced days ago. This franchise locked in its most important player at the level the market demanded, and in doing so sent a signal to every other player on this roster about organizational commitment and organizational confidence that landed with genuine impact in the locker room. The first padded practice of a training camp produces a specific kind of competitive energy that reflects the accumulated organizational investment and the shared belief that the current roster construction is genuinely capable of achieving what everyone in the building is working toward. The energy in that first padded practice in Santa Clara reflected exactly that kind of collective conviction. Niner Faithful, the pads are on and real football is happening. Drop your most honest reactions from everything you have seen in training camps so far in the comments section right now. Does the Bosa and Odigizua combination performing exactly as the theoretical analysis predicted change how you think about this defense's ceiling in 2026? Is the Romello Height developmental timeline more concerning to you after today's padded practice performance, or do you expect him to accelerate through the preseason games? And with Brock Purdy locked in long-term, the receivers performing at an elite level, and this defensive line generating the kind of first padded practice dominance that changes how this entire defense needs to be evaluated. Where does this San Francisco 49ers team finish in the NFC in 2026? Drop everything you have got in the comments section below, hit that like button, and subscribe to the channel because we are covering every single padded practice between now and Week 1 in Melbourne. Let's go Niners!